Hi everyone, welcome to Between the Decades podcast, the podcast where we explore different topics from the perspective of a 30-year-old and a 40-year-old. In this special two-part episode, we're going to be discussing the topic of authenticity in our lives. And I'm your host, Caoilainn.
And I'm your host, Tuğba.
So we want to start with the topic of authenticity in terms of creative pursuits.
Yes, Caoilainn. Actually, a question that I had in my mind for some time now, because you started writing your newsletter last year on Substack around June. And I think it was maybe your third or fourth post, but like quite at the beginning, one of them went viral. And I did wonder if that has kind of shaped, your creativity, because I feel like sometimes when things go viral on social media, it kind of pushes us more into the corner of like, oh, maybe this is what I should be creating more often because it clearly resonates with people. And I've been asking myself this question.
Yeah, definitely that crossed my mind. I mean, that particular post, I wrote it in about 1 hour. It's a very vulnerable and kind of negative post because I'm essentially processing some negative emotions around social media and how it makes me feel. And it's a general topic that I noticed. My best performing posts on Substack are ones that are negative, where I'm complaining about something. And that definitely made me feel pressure to write more things like this, to write more things that were basically similar, that had the same type of tone, that were maybe a little bit more vulnerable or emotional or talking about the dark side of the internet. But that's actually never what I wanted to do with my publication. My publication was very much about exploring grey areas and finding a middle ground between modern life and technology. There's a lot of positives that I talk about as well. And I also have a lot of positive posts. But interestingly, my most positive posts, which are often the ones that I enjoyed writing the most, are my least liked and the ones that get the least engagement. I did feel a lot of pressure, though, to really write something similar. And I think when you have something do well and you get a bit of validation for it, you just instantly get this pressure that you must follow up with it and you must do something similar again. It's sort of like this sense of, we want the same, but we want it better and better every time. So it's really, really difficult to, I guess, resist that urge and instead really just focus on yourself and your writing or any art. In like for any artist, it can be different, and really think about, what do I want to put out there and what is the world telling me to put out there? And maybe those two things are different, and that's okay.
Yeah, and I think sometimes it's actually really difficult in the moment to be able to differentiate it. Is it now really coming subconsciously from a level of like, I want that validation again and I want to be liked again and I want to get all this attention so my post or my work goes viral or is liked on social media? Or is it really driven from, oh, this is actually something that I want to write about? And I feel like these days it's really difficult sometimes to figure out, from where it's coming, this distinction.
100%, because there's kind of two levels of it. There can be, if you have something that does well, as you said, there's that pull to do it more and have the same success again. Or there can also be this feeling of like you're chasing something like that. So
there is a lot of advice also on social media. Well, if you're starting off, just look at what more professional artists are doing, or like, people who've been in the business for very long, and you can learn from them. And surely you can really learn. Like when I first started painting, I was watching a lot of, I was looking at different artists on Instagram and I was, getting inspired. But then it got to the point of like, but how do I find my voice if I just like every day look at 100,000 other voices, whereas the me in this, and yeah, but it's really difficult sometimes, to stay authentic to your voice and explore your authentic voice or continue exploring, even if you're new to it.
And did you feel like that as well when, for example, on Substack, you had loads of notes that went viral? So how did you feel about that? Also, your artist notes to self series, that did really well.
My notes are basically, for people who are not that familiar with Substack, it's the social media aspect of Substack. So you do write newsletter posts, but then you have like smaller notes, like Twitter-esque type of short notes. And yeah, a couple of notes went viral and I was like, oh wow, okay, now I need to. And it wasn't even something that I had written or anything. It was like a image or tweet from someone else that I had, a screenshot that I found on r.na. It's like this platform. And I was like, oh my God, now I need to find more of these images because clearly, this is the kind of things that people want to see. And yeah, I had these thoughts, but then you find yourself in a very unhealthy, toxic, yeah, like it's no longer about what do I want to say today? How do I want to express myself? How can I find something else, something that resonates with people? And like within, I think 2 weeks, I'm like, no, this is not who I want to be. And this is not what I want to be. I have my own voice. And if anything, I want to work being more vocal about my own voice, because I think that also sometimes takes practice. Sometimes very often we're insecure about our own opinions and voice. And the more we practice it, I feel like our voice also, you can fine tune it. And then I think that's when it becomes more and more authentic. It becomes more and more, you.
One of the things that grabbed me recently, which made me think a lot about this topic of authenticity and creativity, was Ethel Cain's new album. I have found this really inspiring, and I have a Substack post about it, which I hope will be live by the time that we post this podcast episode. But it will be linked in the show notes. And essentially, the reason why I was inspired by this was I just felt that her second album that she put out was such a breath of fresh air when it came to the topic of being authentic as an artist and really just pursuing what you want to pursue. For some background, if you don't know what I'm talking about, so Ethel Cain is an American singer-songwriter. She released an album, I believe, in 2022. So her first full-length album on an independent label. So she's fully independent, which I think we can go back to later, but I think that's also very important. And it was very successful. She came out with a highly anticipated second album at the beginning of this year. And it was very funny because the album is just completely different to the first album. And much more polarizing. Like I would say the first album is it still goes in sort of a niche direction, but it's definitely, there's songs on it that I would class as pop, kind of alt rock, country, so things you can sing along with. And then her second album was essentially just like a noise album. It just had a very, very interesting reception because actually critically it's being very well reviewed. But from her fans, let's say, I noticed on her Instagram, there were so many negative comments under the pictures that she posted to promote the album, where people were basically saying, this is so disappointing, the album is horrible, I don't like listening to it, why didn't you make something like the last album, I got into you because of the last one. Someone even said, this is a slap in the face to me, which made me laugh. And I also saw on her Tumblr, people were also then reading into it really deeply, saying like, hey, is it true that you just got too popular and actually you're trying to alienate people that maybe aren't such big fans of you and kind of trim down your audience. And I had to laugh because to that question on Tumblr, she just replied, no. I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but it was something like, I just really like drone music and I wanted to make some. And I just thought that was so awesome because it must be such an immense pressure after you have a successful album like she did, that you have to follow it up and you have to kind of give the same again but better. And I just found it so inspiring that she just didn't care about that and she just made something totally different, that she in a really different creative direction that she also clearly likes. And she didn't really care that when 90% of people listen to it that they wouldn't like it.
I feel like sometimes artists are expected to be puppets, and act in a way that, I don't know, like publishers, record labels, fans, all these, like everyone has an opinion about your art and about you, how you should be a certain way and what kind of art you should make and what kind of book you should write and all these expectations. And but the beauty of being an artist is artists love to explore and play and try different things. And of course, I don't know how it was before, although like last year I watched the Queen documentary on Netflix, and Bohemian Rhapsody is one of the most famous songs. But when they first presented it to their back then record label, the guy said, "What the fuck is this?" He didn't like it. But in the end, they already had enough power and they quit their contract with that record label. And like, look, now it's like hugely popular and it's probably one of the most popular. Even the Netflix documentary is called Bohemian Rhapsody. But in the documentary they're showing as well, and the record label's like, "No, we don't want this. What is this? This is not aligned at all with the previous songs that you made." So I feel like even in the past there was probably pressure and expectation, but now I feel like it's even worse probably with fans and online social media. It feels like everyone can voice their opinion about your art, and behind the screens, I feel like people also have sometimes a bit of a more mean persona, they can write these mean messages. And I don't think it's that easy to say something so mean in someone's face. And pretty sure I've done that as well, when you're getting angry on like WhatsApp with a support agent. It's not something you would say to the person in their face, but when you're on messaging and you're angry, you just say these things. So I just find it mind blowing with all the benefits of the internet, but then also how much, people think they own an artist, and how much they think they can influence their art.
Yeah, I also think that, we have this within capitalism, we have this structure of, business around like the kind of business around art, right? Which, functions well up to a point. If you're a writer and you're writing books, you have a contract and you're getting paid and the company is helping you sell the books. It's an imperfect system in like many ways, but in theory, these things do help. But I think like the thing about artistic work is that, yeah, there's the authenticity side and the pressures that you get to, I guess maybe stick to things that were once successful or continue to find success. And then there's also the time pressure as well. I remember reading something once that always stuck with me where some author had said, you spend your whole life writing your first book and then you get like 18 months to write your second one.
Wow. That is quite deep.
Yeah, exactly.
I never really thought about it, but yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. And then you just have the pressure that comes with that, right?
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask you, Tuba, also about when we think about this digital persona, cultivating an authentic digital persona, if that can even exist, if that's the question. You have quite a few followers on Instagram. You have had for many years. How did you feel that affected you in terms of, how you presented yourself or wanted to present yourself online?
I've been on Instagram like since the beginning when it first came out, like many years. But then when I went traveling in Asia, I took it as like a personal project. So I went backpacking with a friend, and then I was like, you know what? I'm not working now. I'm going to take this Instagram thing a bit more serious and, use the right hashtags and make it like a marketing project out of it somehow. Cause I was working back then in marketing, but then it pretty quickly escalated actually. Yeah, I got quite a lot of followers through my travel pictures. I turned it a bit into a blog. Like my very early posts were about like the places I've been, like travel pictures, food, the history of the city. But then when I came back from my travels, I'm like, okay, that's not really what I'm so much interested anymore, even though I still travel. I don't want to be a travel blogger. And then somehow the attention shifted to myself. And then I started posting pictures of myself and some of them like a bit more revealing. And I think the bigger problem became when I started posting these revealing pictures because I started getting more likes, but then some weird, creepy man started following me. But then it felt also good because my followers were growing. And then I had somehow this expectation that I now have to post pictures of myself, revealing photos of myself to get followers. And I think it also clashed a bit with my background. I'm a Muslim woman. I mean, my parents are not very religious, but still, like being a Muslim woman really shaped, how I see myself and yeah, within the world and my sexuality and everything. And I discussed this with my therapist as well, because at some point I'm like, am I pushing too much now, the buttons of like these revealing photos? But actually, if I'm being very honest, I don't feel so comfortable about it. It's so easy to get carried away and think of yourself very one-dimensional, the way you show yourself on social media, and forget that you're a multi-dimensional person and you have different interests and not just one interest that you're showing or displaying. And I feel like quite a lot of people, even if you write about different topics, it's still very limited view of who you are, Caoileann, and not like the whole persona of who you are.
I think any type of social validation you get can be so addictive. And I think that can also be the case in real life as well. Like, I think social media is like that on steroids because you just have all of the engineered elements of it that make it very pronounced and addictive. But I mean, I'm thinking of situations even in real life. Like, let's say I definitely know some people that I've met over the years who were maybe, they had this kind of reputation for being like the fun party person, let's say. And you can really see, maybe with a bit of hindsight now, how that sort of fueled them into maybe behaviors that weren't so healthy because they got like social validation from that.
Yeah, definitely. And I definitely see that at work too. I work for a big IT company, American IT company, and we have like a lot of what we do is around sales. So we have a big sales organization, and it's interesting. Last week, I spoke to a colleague, and there is one of these salespeople. He's not very popular in the company. But funny enough, my colleague was like, yeah, we've been on a work trip, and actually I ended up having drinks with him after work, and you won't believe it, Tuba. He's like a very different person in his personal life or outside of work. He's not this person, that annoys us sometimes at work. I'm like, really? And I feel like even at work, people have a certain pressure on themselves to act in a certain way. And I don't think it's exclusive, like for someone working in sales or being a man. Also as a woman, like when I first started my career in tech, there were barely any women that I could resonate with. I felt like a lot of women were wearing this more masculine hat, so that they are more accepted within the tech world and within the company. But what I do wonder, Caoileann, I mean, our podcast is called Between the Decades, and we're trying to also, show the perspective of a 40-year-old and 30-year-old, because this was my experience back in the day. And I hope things have changed. I mean, at least the organizations I've been working, things definitely changed. But I was wondering, how has your experience being like a woman working in tech that is 10 years younger than me?
I still unfortunately think that the management style that is sometimes pushed tends to lean towards the masculine. So when I had more senior responsibility, once I was managing people, I was told that, yeah, you have to be meaner, and yeah, be a bit stricter with people, which I just didn't, because I just don't think I think that's a very one track way of acting. And I still think, unfortunately, there is a template of how people feel like you need to be a leader in any type of. I mean, I'm not a CEO of a large company or anything, but it kind of scales up basically. But it always feels like the same genre of person, whether it's a man or a woman.
Okay, I'm thinking maybe not that much has changed. If someone gave you this feedback, that's crazy.
What do you think about the line of where, being your authentic self in work, but then also kind of holding some things back and having this, I guess, veneer of professionalism?
Yeah, and I don't know if there is a definite answer to this, because I think it really depends with whatever you feel comfortable. And I feel like there isn't even the perfect way to do it. I still have days where I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have shared that in the team meeting. But then, like, I think it's like constantly tuning into yourself. And like, I don't think it's even exclusive to work. Sometimes I feel this with friends too. I'm like, I'm like now, like, I've been doing therapy for many years, and sometimes I share some of the things that I've discussed with my therapist. But I'm like, actually, it would have better if I kept it between me and my therapist and wouldn't have shared it with my best friend. But in the end, we're just human. We also like to share things, and the positive with your best friend is like, if you share with your best friend will be understanding, even if it's an overshare. Whereas at work, well, you have to be sometimes careful because people can also use it against you. And I think that happens, unfortunately, quite often. So I think what has worked for me, I have been always the person who was like holding back a lot of things, like totally not sharing anything personal, not sharing my social media with anyone. But that has changed. I feel like I'm a bit more balanced now, and I share my Substack posts as well on my LinkedIn, even though my Substack posts are quite personal thing. Because I know another writer on Substack, she also works in tech and she lives in Munich, and she DM'd me and she was like, wow, that's so brave that you're sharing your Substack post. She's like, I didn't even tell my colleagues that I'm writing a newsletter. But I'm really trying to find a balance of like shifting, of course, because I think it's also nice to share sometimes, personal things that just makes work a bit more human and not just corporate bullshit. Like, just like you come into a meeting and you only talk about work, and all this business jargon. I think it's nice to be human, but yeah, it's kind of a balance, which I don't, of course, like not every day I have this balance, but I'm trying. I don't think both ways are not healthy, oversharing, but also not sharing at all. But what I think is that with age, you find more ways to find that balance. And also, even if you fuck up, you're not as harsh on yourself, even if you maybe in one team meeting overshare. Before I used to be like, oh my God, why did I say this now? Or like, oh, why did I tell this person this? This was too much. But now I'm like, it happened, move on.
I think we've all had that feeling in work of like saying something and then being like, I just want to take it back. I know I never said that, but yeah, I mean, it just is what it is.
Yeah, the older you get, the more you realize, well, we're just human.
Yeah.
We're just like, I read it once somewhere and it really stayed in my head. We're all just learning to live. You know, I think even with 90, if you ask a 90-year-old, it's like, no one is perfect and no one will be perfect. Even on your deathbed, there will be still probably, oversharing something, or I don't think it's about perfection. That's my conclusion or that's where I'm at with many things in life.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We're super, super keen to hear your thoughts about the topic of authenticity, and we will continue to explore this topic in our next episode. Bye.